Okay, welcome to the lab for Module 5. We can talk about CodeQL. To start off with, I am in my Cloud Security Bootcamp GitHub repository. I only have one, which is an example lab file that I created. I had that enabled so just for me to see how I have enabled and what I have enabled for security. I can simply click on the security tab on the top, and clicking on that, which has a number 3 next to it, I can simply go and see, okay, my dependabot alert is enabled, my code scanning alert is enabled, and my scanning for secrets is also enabled. But it looks like I only have 3 secrets, which is probably a bad thing, but still. But I don't have any dependabot vulnerability. I don't have any code scanning vulnerability. Now, I'll be honest, I'm not the best programmer in the world. But one thing I know for sure is I at least know how to find vulnerable code, which I can fix. So in this scenario, I have an example for you that I've looked into before. There's a very popular organization called OWASP. And what I'll do is I will copy that repository over here. So this is called Juice Shop, which is a repository from OWASP. Juice Shop. OWASP is a open source vulnerability management project. They stand for Open Web Application Security Project, and the intent behind OWASP is the most modern, sophisticated, insecure web application. That's how they describe it, because the intent behind creating this repository is for people like you and me, for us to learn on how we can do security and what are some of the bad things we can look at. But in our specific scenario, we can use this to test out the GitHub Advanced Security code scanning option. So for this, I would do a fork. That is, I would create a copy of this for myself. I can do that by clicking on the fork button. You can click on the drop down if you like, and you can say where you want to create it. I already have a fork on my personal, but I want to create a new one. So I'll just click on create a new one, and I can choose the owner to be my organization. Now, there is no other repository under Cloud Security Bootcamp with that name, so that's what would stick. And I can probably say number 2, so just it's a bit different. And I can copy the master branch only. I don't really want to have any of the sub branches. If I've done all of that, I can just click on the green button, which is create fork. Now, it does take a few seconds, sometimes a few minutes, but well, it only take a few seconds, but that is how it would be. And now if you notice, this is under Cloud Security Bootcamp. If you see where my mouse is highlighted, it is a public repository called Juice Shop under Cloud Security Bootcamp, and it's forked from the actual original repository. Now, we're not done yet. We obviously only have a vulnerable repository that I have just brought into my GitHub organization. I don't really know yet how to learn code scanning. So what I'll do is I'll go and enable this first. So if I go to settings on the top right, and code security and analysis. Now, I've mentioned this before, but I'll call it again. Because this is a fork, and because we just learned from the class that CodeQL code scanning requires GitHub Actions, we would not be able to do anything just yet. So let me show you why. If I go to code security analysis, and if I see, look at that, it's not enabled because GitHub Action is not available. Now I can either click on enable it here, or I can submit a code scanning result, which is the SARIF file. I can click on that, and basically talks about how you can upload a SARIF file using the 3 options that are available. But I'm going to keep it simple for you guys. So I'm just going to simply click on enable it. Now it's going to ask me, hey, you understand? You can either look at the workflow directory yourself, but you can look at it after as well. But you can say, I understand my workflow, go ahead and enable them, because we are smart people. So I'm going to click on the green button. All right, now we are under the Actions tab, which is your GitHub Actions tab. Workflow, and as we just learned in the class, workflow is where you define all the automated action that the GitHub action is about to take. We're obviously keen on the CodeQL scan. It hasn't run yet, so that's why you don't see it, but you can see the file that will be triggered when CodeQL is enabled. So if I click on that, you would be able to see the file, which is the workflow and code analysis file. This is the file that will run. This is what a CodeQL custom would look like, custom advanced one look like. The easiest way to understand this, this is a GitHub expert. This is a GitHub action file more than a CodeQL file. So the simple way to understand this, if you've never seen CodeQL, is that this would run on push as well as a pull request. This also calls out that, hey, when you are running a job called analyze, run the analyze function, run it on an Ubuntu container. It should have action and content as the read, and the security event should be written down. It should be on JavaScript and TypeScript language. Now, once it's defined what the analysis directory database container would be, you can then look at this number of steps. Each name is the step that would be taken. That's name, go check out repository, initialize CodeQL, and then auto build, perform CodeQL analysis. Now, all of that is triggering a GitHub/QL action, and it's already called out the file and the checkout it needs to run. That's the simplest example of a CodeQL scan. Now that we have done all of this, you should come back onto security, which is in the top. If I click on that, you would notice that dependabot was already set up. So it has identified that I have 13 vulnerabilities in my dependabot, which I'm going to ignore for now because we are focused on code scanning. At the moment, it's not, if I click on code scanning, it's not configured. But instead of configuring here, let me just take you to settings and code security and analysis. If you scroll down, you should see code scanning. And now look at that. It looks a bit different, doesn't it? Now, I have spoken about the third-party tools. I will talk about it again. But for now, let's just use setup and default. I'm happy with this. It's identified that I have Python as well as JavaScript in my repository. It has extended some query suites as well. And I have it on push and pull. It would run on a weekly schedule. Now, I can edit this if I want, but I don't really want to. So I'm just going to go enable CodeQL. Now, once this is starting to set up, you should see assigned repository settings saved. May take a while because code will full scan of the repository. Now, if you look at the bottom, it says it's setting up. So CodeQL is still setting up. If you want to see what it's about, you can go to the Actions tab, which is on the top, and you can see it's running a CodeQL setup. Now, if you give it a few minutes, it should run the CodeQL, and hopefully, because we definitely have vulnerable code in here, the security number should update from 13 to a larger number with a bit more than just my dependency bot alert. But while it's doing that, I wanted to show you what third-party tools you can use as well. Now, if I go into settings, I come back over here, and if I click on the explore workflow, there are 74 code scanning workflows that are available for us to use. The best one obviously being the CodeQL analysis from GitHub itself, if you just want to stick to that. But there are a lot of third parties that you can also use for code scanning. There are Microsoft products, non-Microsoft products, a lot of them basically. You can keep going through all of them. Pick the one that your organization has already gotten an allegiance with or probably already working with. They also, as you can see, this is by GitHub Actions as well. I would probably only go for the one that you recognize. There's one from Meta for a Python compliance one. I would only look at the ones that you are comfortable to run in your organization and are by, I guess, for lack of a better word, identities that you trust or organizations that you trust. I think at this point in time, I'm only accepting GitHub Actions as the owners or Microsoft as the owner. That's probably trustworthy for me. I can probably use those, Microsoft Corporation, quite a few of them, but depending on the purpose, you can search the one that makes the most sense for you and just use that. So you can integrate that. To integrate that, let's just do configure. If you click on configure, it takes you to the CodeQL file. Now, this is exactly what we spoke about in the class. We gave it the name. When do we want it? On what branches do we want it? How often should the schedule run for that workflow? What should the analyzed job have? Whether the security event should be written. You should fetch internal or private CodeQL packs. The strategy. And then we are on to the steps. This is exactly what I was showing you in the previous one. If you notice over here, you can first initialize CodeQL. That's what's going to kick off. It's going to identify the language from its existing matrix and also the build. And if the build is manual, it's going to run a shell command. And the shell command is going to basically, if you are manual, make bootstrap, make release, and exit. And the rest of the analysis would happen at the same time as well. That's when it would use the perform code analysis. Now, this is how CodeQL itself runs, which is what we were seeing over here. If I just refresh this page, sorry, just 1 second. Oops, not that I wanted to do that. It is still setting up. So if I come back to the action, it can still set up, still in progress. Give it a few minutes, and it should just basically work after that. So I'm going to pause the video and I'll come back. Okay, okay, I'm back, and looks like my CodeQL is set up. It's finished. So we go into CodeQL. I can see that there was a bit of an error, as you can see over here, real-time shooting of the error. For some reason, it was not able to make a connection and was timed out, but it still finished. So I'm not going to question it for now because it was a success. But let's just quickly see what it did. So if I click on analyze, I can see it did a perform. It did a setup. So if I clicking on this, it you can see what it did exactly what was called out in the file. It basically had a checkout repository with it basically called out the image. It called out the GitHub token to be used. And as it went through it, it initialized it, set up CodeQL, and perform post initialize. You can actually see the entire job over here. The more important thing over here is the output, cleaning up orphan, evaluate. There are no errors over here, which is a good thing. So it definitely worked. So did analyzing the Python files, and it did a great job of looking at it. And it did some adjusting required. Nope, not required. Okay. So now if you look on the top, you probably will notice that, hey, there are 132 things that have been wrong, which is probably not a bad, well, it is a bad thing. As I was saying in my example, there are 119 incorrect, or there are 119 vulnerable files potentially if impacting this particular code repository. It is what it is meant to be. So if you see more, don't be afraid, because it just could be that when you're running this code scan against the version of Juice Shop that you're running, there may have been more vulnerabilities that have been discovered. But the important thing over here is I have it enabled, and now I can see my code scanning result. As you would have noticed, it does take a few minutes even after it's turned on for it to finish a full scan. But this is what I am facing at this point in time. I have 119 open issues. Now, it is important to understand the criticality. So if I click on severity, you would see there's low, medium, high, and critical. This is what I was referring to in the class, that critical means that it is really critical, that this should be looked at today, right now. And it may be different for different organizations, but I would still, looking at the critical that we have, if I just filter this by critical, you would notice that there is a lot of critical right there, right? So I'm just gonna go, okay, I can't do everything here, so I'm gonna sort. What's the best way to approach this? I have 119 CodeQL, 19 of them out of the 119 have been found to be critical. So I would, as a first step, if I was most organization, I would just go through these. Let's take the first one. Now, remember, we are doing it based on the severity. We're not doing it based on, what looks the most interesting. It is very important for you to know that you're responding based on the criticality of the severity of the alert raised over here. Critical being the most important, followed by high, followed by medium, followed by low. And when there are 119, the last thing you want to do is send it all to your developers, because as we saw in the class, this could have a lot of false positive in there as well. So let's investigate the first one just for, actually, how about we do code injection? That probably is a more enticing one, or even a hard-coded credential as well. That could be something people should look at. So if I click on hard-coded credential, oh, look at that. It has a bearer token right there, which it definitely looks like a password. So I probably would, this is definitely, in my opinion, it is a critical, because I can see it's a code. Now, me as a security analyst who's reviewing this, I can either copy out this entire token, and if I have an internal validator for OAuth tokens or just JOT tokens, I can simply use that to identify, is this coded, is this key still vulnerable, or is it still active? And if it is, I need to ask the developer responsible for this repository to replace them and probably remove them as well, especially if this is a public repository, which in my case it is. What about another one? Let's just go code injection, which we were looking at just slightly. This is based on the fact that I am not filtering the input that I'm taking from the user. That's where it's calling out that, hey, by the way, if you're directly evaluating user input, code without properly sanitizing the input first allows an attacker's arbitrary code execution. So I could literally send it some kind of an injection attack, and it would be interpreting it and running that instead of running the actual code. Now, these are some of the examples, and as you would have seen in the class, we spoke about how these are to be triaged. Don't send all of them to the developers in one go. Make sure you at least have a look at whether they are false positive or true positives. Now, if you notice, it's reported a bit of a warning for me. So if I go into this, I can see that the status of the tool. Now, there's two ways to come here. You can either click on that button, or you can go back on tools, go back one more. You can see over here, it says add tool and it says tools. So if you press on tools, you should see I only have one tool called CodeQL, and it last ran 9 minutes ago. It is looking for, it has looked at 571 that were TypeScript, 3 files that were Python, and 14 files that were JavaScript. So it's primarily a TypeScript file or TypeScript repository. I can click on this and view the setup. I can go, okay, it is the CodeQL that I had enabled. It is set for default. Nothing to see there. I can click on view configuration. I can see when it was last configured, and look at that. I'm actually on the same screen that I was on before. Now, if this was important for me when it last ran the scan and I found that it could not process a file due to a syntax error, a parse error for syntax was to. Now, I have two options. Either this is a legit, like I can go into the last scan and look at where it found, what it found, and look at that, all of that. And there was one particular place, it was called out as, it should not be right. Okay, so all of these looks like name changes that need to happen. And yeah, that has not been called out. I'm gonna ignore the white space for now. Yeah, so it's basically showing us, hey, this is a change that we can commit if we want by fixing broken links, and it is being shared by someone else. And at this point in time, I don't want to accept any queries from, so I'm going to keep going back. One more step back, I can cancel it. All right, now the syntax error, at this point in time, I have the choice of either I can use the exclude option in my configuration file to exclude the folder altogether where that JavaScript is, because we didn't have a lot of Java files. But if I want to, I can just correct that as well and use that as a way to, I guess, continue my scan in full glory. Now, these are just the standard tools that are available from CodeQL. If I keep going back, you can obviously, worthwhile knowing, you can also add tools as well, which takes you back to the workflow screen, and you can set up a workflow yourself. That is how you would identify, enable, as well as triage CodeQL results for based on code scanning done by GitHub Advanced Security. That is all I wanted to cover in this lab. I will see you in the next one.